She stood, back straight, hands folded in front of her, eyes forward. Not because she was brave, but because she had nothing left to lose. The courtroom was full, journalists with notebooks balanced on their knees, strangers who had followed the story online for weeks, staff members from the Hargrove estate who had once smiled at her in hallways and now stared at the floor when she looked their way. And at the far end of the room, behind a mahogany table that probably cost more than her childhood home, sat Clifford Hargrove. Billionaire, father, the man who had once told her, "You are the only person in this house my daughter truly trusts." He was looking at her now, but not the way he used to. The prosecutor adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Miss Baptiste, you had full access to this family, their home, their accounts, their child, and you used that access to steal $2,300,000 from an 8-year-old girl's trust fund." The room shifted. "Is that correct?" Reine Baptiste opened her mouth, and the only sound that came out was a breath. Because how do you defend yourself against a lie so perfectly constructed that even the truth sounds guilty? Stay with me. Because what happened in that courtroom in the next 48 hours will change everything you thought you knew about trust. 3 years before that courtroom, before the handcuffs, before the headlines, before Clifford Hargrove looked at Reine Baptiste like she was something to be erased. There was a Tuesday morning in late September. Reine remembered it clearly. The way the light came through the kitchen windows of the Hargrove estate in long golden sheets, the smell of cinnamon oatmeal on the stove, and the sound of small feet running across marble floors. Reine, I drew you something." Isla Hargrove, 8 years old, missing one front tooth, and the most serious child Reine had ever met, came skidding around the corner in her socks, holding a piece of paper with both hands like it was a royal decree. Reine crouched down to her level. It was a drawing, crayon, slightly lopsided, 2 figures, one tall, one small, standing in what appeared to be a garden. Underneath, in careful, uneven handwriting, it said, "Me and Reine, my favorite person." Reine looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then she looked at the little girl in front of her, this serious, quiet, brilliant child who rarely smiled but meant every smile she gave. "Can I keep this forever?" Reine asked. Isla nodded like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Obviously, I made it for you." That was the thing about Isla Hargrove. She did not give pieces of herself lightly. She was a child who had learned very early that the world was full of people who smiled at her because of her father's name. She had a radar for authenticity that most adults never developed. And she had chosen Reine. Reine Baptiste had come to the Hargrove estate through a staffing agency 18 months earlier. She was 31, meticulous, calm, the kind of person who remembered details other people overlooked, that Isla preferred her grilled cheese cut in triangles, not squares, that she needed exactly 12 minutes of quiet before she could sleep, that she processed big emotions through drawing, not talking. Clifford Hargrove had interviewed her himself, not because he interviewed all staff, he didn't, but because Isla was different. Isla was everything. He'd lost his wife, Teresa, to a car accident 4 years prior. Since then, it had been just him and his daughter in this enormous house filled with staff and silence. He'd hired 3 nannies before Reine. Each one had lasted less than 6 months, not because they were bad at their jobs, but because Isla wouldn't let them in. Reine was different. He'd noticed it within the first week. The way Isla followed Reine around the kitchen asking questions she'd never asked anyone. The way she laughed, actually laughed, at something Reine said during dinner prep. The way she fell asleep one evening on the sofa with her head against Reine's arm, something she hadn't done with another human being since her mother died. Clifford had stood in the doorway watching that for a long time. And something in him, something wound tight for 4 years, had quietly loosened. He was not an easy man. Let that be said honestly. Clifford Hargrove had built his wealth through commercial real estate, buying distressed buildings, transforming them, selling them for 5 to 10 times their value. He was precise, demanding. He operated on data, not emotion. He valued competence above warmth and efficiency above sentiment. He was also, when he chose to be, unexpectedly perceptive. He noticed that Wren never asked for things. Other staff negotiated days off, bonuses, flexibility. Wren simply did her job and asked for nothing. He noticed that she never photographed anything inside the estate, never spoke about the family to the other staff, and never once used Isla as a prop for personal stories when speaking to him. He raised her salary after 6 months without being asked. She thanked him once simply and went back to Isla. He respected that more than he could articulate. It was Sylvie Caldwell who first told him something was wrong. Sylvie had been Clifford's personal assistant for 2 years. She was efficient, sharp, and possessed of a particular talent for anticipating what Clifford needed before he asked for it. She was also, though Clifford had never fully acknowledged this to himself, deeply invested in her position in his life. Not just professionally. Sylvie had watched Wren Baptiste arrive in this house and slowly, organically, become the emotional center of it. She had watched Isla light up around her. She had watched Clifford soften in ways he hadn't softened in years. And she had watched herself become, slowly, invisible in a house she had considered her territory. She was patient, though. Sylvie Caldwell was always patient. The accusation did not come all at once. It came in pieces, deliberately, over weeks. It started with Sylvie mentioning, casually, in passing, that she'd noticed some irregularities in the household accounts. Nothing alarming, just worth watching. Clifford was busy. He made a note and moved on. 2 weeks later, Sylvie mentioned it again, this time with a printed summary. Small discrepancies in the household spending. Amounts too minor to trigger automatic alerts, but consistent. And always on days when Wren had been given access to the household account to purchase supplies for Isla. Clifford frowned. Have you confirmed this? I'm still looking, Sylvie said. I didn't want to alarm you unnecessarily. He appreciated her discretion. That's what he thought it was. He did not yet understand what he was looking at. 3 weeks later, Sylvie came to him with something different entirely. She sat across from him in his study, and her face was arranged in the particular expression of someone delivering news they wish they didn't have to deliver. She placed a folder on his desk. Inside were documents, bank records, an offshore account opened 8 months ago, statements showing 37 separate transfers, ranging from $4,000 to $90,000 each. Total amount transferred, $2,312,000. The account belonged to a shell entity with no traceable ownership. But the account had been opened with one piece of identification: Wren Baptiste's driver's license. The application had been signed in her handwriting, confirmed, Sylvie explained quietly, by the same handwriting specialist the firm used for contract verification. And the bank's CCTV footage from the day the account was opened showed a woman, medium height, dark complexion, wearing a gray coat. Wren owned a gray coat. He'd seen her wear it. Clifford sat very still for a very long time. The money had been redirected from Isla's trust fund, the fund Teresa had set up before she died, the money Clifford had added to every year since, because it was the one concrete thing he could still give his daughter from her mother. His jaw tightened. How long have you known? I confirmed it yesterday, Sylvie said. I'm so sorry, Clifford. He stood up from his desk. And in that moment, in that one devastating, certain moment, every warm, softened, loosened thing inside Clifford Hargrove locked back into place. Like a vault door closing. He did not confront Wren. He called his lawyers first, then the police, then the bank. By the time Wren arrived at the estate the following morning, with a canvas bag of art supplies she'd bought for Isla's weekend project, there were two police officers waiting in the foyer. She stopped when she saw them. She looked at Clifford. He was standing at the top of the stairs, still, quiet, his face a closed door. "Mr. Hargrove." He said nothing. The officer stepped forward. "Miss Baptiste, you are under arrest for the fraudulent transfer of funds from the Hargrove Family Trust. You have the right to remain silent." The canvas bag slipped from her fingers. Art supplies scattered across the marble floor, colored pencils rolling in every direction, a small sketchpad Isla had specifically asked for. Wren looked at the pencils. Then she looked up at Clifford again. "I didn't do this," she said, quietly, clearly, without tears. "Whatever they've shown you, I didn't do this." He held her gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then he looked away. And that looking away was the moment Wren Baptiste understood that truth by itself is not always enough. From somewhere upstairs came a sound. Small feet running. "Wren!" Isla appeared at the top of the stairs, pajamas, hair unbrushed, eyes moving rapidly between Wren, the officers, and her father. "Daddy, what's happening? Why are they?" "Go back to your room, Isla." "But Wren." "Isla," his voice was a wall, "go now." The little girl stood there for one more second. She looked at Wren. And Wren, hands already being guided behind her back, looked at Isla and did the only thing she could. She held her gaze steady, calm. "I'm okay, you're okay, don't be scared." Isla pressed her lips together, nodded once, like she was memorizing something. Then she turned and walked back to her room. The door closed quietly behind her. And Wren was led out of the house she had considered, for the first time in years, something close to home. Before we go further into Wren's story, I want to take a moment to welcome you, especially if this is your first time here. This is Nanny Grace Channel, a place built for the stories the world overlooks. Stories about loyalty earned and stolen, about truth buried under beautiful lies, about the invisible people in powerful homes who see everything, say nothing, and pay the highest price for someone else's secrets. If a story like Wren's, quiet, dignified, and fighting against a current no one else can see, speaks to something inside you, then you are exactly where you are meant to be. Take a moment, hit that subscribe button, and stay close because this story is far from over. And neither are the ones waiting for you after this. The trial was set for 8 weeks after the arrest. In those 8 weeks, Wren Baptiste learned what it felt like to be a story. Not a person, a story. Her face appeared in online articles alongside words like trusted nanny and shocking betrayal, and inside the Hargrove household. Comment sections filled with people who had never met her, never spoken to her, and had constructed complete portraits of her character from 2 photographs and a press release. She was staying with her older sister, Candace, in a small apartment across the city. The bail had been covered by Candace's savings, money set aside for years. Wren knew what that meant, and it sat in her chest every single day like a stone. She had one attorney, a public defender named Franklin Osai, a careful, methodical man who wore the same 2 suits in rotation and spoke with the precision of someone who knew exactly how much every word costs in a courtroom. He reviewed the evidence for the 3rd time on a Thursday evening and set his pen down on the kitchen table. "Wren, I have to be honest with you." "Please," she said. "The evidence is constructed, I believe you. But constructed evidence, when it is done well, is almost impossible to dismantle without something from the inside. The handwriting match is strong. The CCTV woman could be you, same build, same coat style. And the bank used your actual ID. Someone had access to it." "I keep my ID in my bag, at the estate." Franklin looked at her. "Who had access to your bag?" Wren was quiet for a moment. The answer was, everyone. It was a large estate. She left her bag in the staff room during the day. The staff room had no lock. It was the kind of detail that had never mattered before because there had never been a reason for it to matter. All of them, she said. Franklin nodded slowly. Then we need something else, something they can't explain away. They sat in silence. Neither of them, in that moment, knew that the something else they needed had already been captured, already saved, sitting on a pink-cased tablet in a little girl's bedroom. Waiting. Clifford Hargrove, meanwhile, was not sleeping. He told no one this. He told no one most things. But the truth was that in the weeks since Wren's arrest, the estate had changed in ways he could not quantify and could not fix. Isla had not drawn a single picture. She had stopped asking for her oatmeal the specific way she liked it. She went to school, came home, did her homework, and went to bed. No questions, no stories, no laughter. She had not asked about Wren once. That was the part that worried him most. Not the anger. He could have handled anger. Anger was familiar territory. But Isla's silence was different. It was the silence of a child who has decided that some things are simply too painful to say out loud. Sylvie moved through the estate with graceful efficiency, filling gaps, anticipating needs, managing the household with a competence that should have reassured him. It did not reassure him. He could not say why. When he examined his discomfort honestly, it dissolved. There was nothing concrete to point to. Sylvie had shown him evidence. Real, documented, verified evidence. He had seen it himself. He had seen the bank records, the handwriting confirmation, the account registered to Wren's ID. And yet, late one night past midnight, the house entirely still, he walked past Isla's room and stopped outside her door. He could hear her. Not crying, not talking. Drawing. The scratch of pencil on paper. Fast, intense, the way she drew when something was moving through her that she didn't know how to say. He raised his hand to knock, then lowered it, and stood there in the dark hallway of his enormous house, listening to his daughter draw alone in the middle of the night, unable to reach her and unwilling to admit why. Sylvie Caldwell was not sleeping either, but for different reasons. She was by any measure intelligent. The plan had taken 6 months to execute. The handwriting samples collected over weeks, photographs of notes Wren left for Isla, shopping lists, reminders on the household board. The ID, borrowed from Wren's bag and returned before she noticed. The look-alike, a woman Sylvie had found through a contact she'd paid in cash and would never see again. The offshore account constructed through 3 layers of intermediary, clean enough that a basic forensic audit would find nothing. She had been meticulous, but she had not accounted for one thing. Children. Specifically, one small, serious, intensely observant 8-year-old who spent most of her time in rooms where adults forgot she existed. 3 months before the arrest, on a Wednesday afternoon when Clifford was traveling and Wren was off for the day, Sylvie had made a phone call. She made it in the study. She had checked. The house staff were in the kitchen wing. She was alone. She was not alone. Isla had come home from school 30 minutes early, a half-day she hadn't mentioned to anyone because she'd forgotten. She'd come up the back staircase, gone to her room, retrieved her tablet for a video she wanted to watch, and then wandered into the hallway looking for Wren. She'd heard Sylvie's voice. Isla had always found Sylvie slightly uncomfortable in the way children sometimes find adults who smile too specifically. She'd stopped outside the study door. Sylvie was sitting at Clifford's desk, papers spread in front of her. She was practicing something, her hand moving repeatedly across the page, the same motion, over and over. She was also on the phone, speaking quietly but not quietly enough. Yes, it's done. I just need the final transfer confirmation and then the account traces back to her, not me. Yes, the signature is perfect now. I've been studying her handwriting for months. A pause. No one suspects anything. She's too busy playing house with the child. By the time it's discovered, the paper trail will be airtight. Another pause, a short laugh. Of course Clifford will believe it. He believes what the evidence tells him. That's what makes him predictable. Isla stood in the hallway. She did not fully understand every word, but she understood enough. And Isla Hargrove, who had grown up in a house where instinct was more reliable than explanation, lifted her tablet, opened the camera, and recorded 3 minutes and 47 seconds through the study door's gap. She didn't know why exactly, only that something told her this mattered. She saved the file, put her tablet away, and went to her room. She said nothing to anyone, because the one person she would have told was Wren. And Wren was no longer there. The night before the trial, Isla sat on her bed with her tablet in her lap. She opened the file and watched it. Then she watched it again. Then she did something she had been thinking about doing for 7 weeks. She walked to her father's bedroom door and knocked. "Come in." She stood in the doorway. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, still in his work clothes, tie loosened. He looked tired in a way that was different from his normal tiredness. Heavier. "Isla, it's late." "I know." She crossed the room, climbed up onto the bed beside him, something she hadn't done since she was 6, and placed the tablet in his hands. "You need to watch this," she said. "What is it?" "Just watch." He looked at her face, then he looked at the screen. He pressed play. The room was very quiet for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. When it ended, Clifford didn't move. Isla watched him, watched the color drain from his face, watched the thing he'd locked away in himself crack open slowly in the silence of a late-night bedroom. "When did you record this?" "Before they took Wren away." "Why didn't you tell me?" Isla looked at him with her mother's eyes and her father's precision. "Because you didn't ask me, Daddy. You never asked me." He looked at the tablet in his hands. And Clifford Hargrove, a man who had built an empire on certainty, who had trusted evidence over instinct, data over feeling, documentation over the quiet voice of a child, sat in the wreckage of his own confidence and understood, for the first time, exactly what he had done. The trial opened at 9 a.m. on a gray Tuesday morning. The courtroom was full before the doors officially opened. Wren sat at the defense table in a dark navy dress she had borrowed from Candace. She had slept 4 hours. Her hands were still. Her face was still. She had made herself a promise that morning in the mirror she would not perform composure. She would simply be it. Whatever happened in this room, she would not give anyone the satisfaction of watching her break. Franklin Osai sat beside her with his folders arranged in precise order, his face neutral, revealing nothing. The prosecution was led by Thomas Hale, a man in his 50s with a habit of pausing just long enough before each sentence to create the impression of reluctant certainty. He opened with the financial records. He displayed them on a large screen. He walked the jury through every transfer, 37 of them, slow and methodical, like a man laying bricks. He displayed the handwriting analysis. 2 experts confirmed. The signature on the account application matched Wren Baptiste's handwriting within a 93% confidence margin. He showed the CCTV footage. The woman in the gray coat walking into the bank, presenting identification, signing documents. The image was not perfect. The angle was imperfect. The quality grainy enough for ambiguity, but the suggestion was enough. Miss Baptiste had access, opportunity, and means, Thomas Hale told the jury. She was trusted completely and absolutely, and she used that trust to reach into a dead woman's gift to her child and take it. Wren did not look at the jury, she looked at the table. The prosecution rested at noon. The defense opened in the afternoon. Franklin Osai called 2 witnesses, a former colleague who spoke to Wren's character, a financial analyst who raised technical questions about the transfer routing that Thomas Hale disposed of efficiently on cross-examination. It was not enough. Wren could feel it, Franklin could feel it. The air in the courtroom had the particular weight of a decision already made. Then the door at the back of the courtroom opened. A man in a gray suit entered. He walked to the bailiff and said something quietly. The bailiff looked up, walked to the judge's bench. There was a murmured conversation. Judge Patricia Norwood looked up from her papers. "We will take a 30-minute recess," she said. What happened in that 30 minutes was not witnessed by most of the courtroom. But here is what was true. Clifford Hargrove had arrived at the courthouse at 7 that morning with his lawyer, the original tablet, a certified digital forensics report on the video's authenticity, and the full cooperation of a financial investigator who had spent the previous 48 hours working without sleep on Clifford's instruction and at extraordinary cost, tracing the offshore account back through its 3 layers of intermediary to a single beneficial owner. Sylvie Caldwell. The evidence was not circumstantial. It was conclusive. Court reconvened. Thomas Hale looked, for the first time, uncertain. Judge Norwood addressed the room. "New evidence has been submitted to this court under extraordinary circumstances. In the interest of justice, this court will hear it." Franklin Osai stood. "The defense calls Isla Hargrove." The murmur that moved through the courtroom was the kind that feels physical, a ripple of shock, a collective intake of breath. A child, 8 years old, being called to testify. Thomas Hale rose immediately. "Objection, Your Honor, the witness is a minor. The witness has been assessed and is prepared to testify voluntarily with full understanding of the process." Objection overruled. The door opened. Isla Hargrove walked in. She was wearing a blue dress, hair brushed neatly. She walked to the stand with the particular bearing of a child who has decided that this matters enough to be very serious about. She was seated. The microphone was adjusted. The room was completely still. Franklin approached her gently. "Isla, can you tell the court your name and how old you are?" "Isla Hargrove, I'm 8. "And do you know why you're here today?" "Yes," she looked at the jury, not fidgeting, not performing, simply there. "I'm here because Wren didn't do what they said she did, and I can prove it." Thomas Hale shifted in his seat. Franklin continued. "Isla, can you tell the court what you recorded on your tablet and when?" And Isla told them. She told them in the clear, detailed, unhurried language of a child who had been going over this story in her mind for weeks, making sure she had it right. She told them about coming home early, about hearing Sylvie's voice, about seeing her at the desk practicing a signature she now knew was Wren's, about the phone call, about saving the video because something told her to. "Why did you wait so long to tell someone?" Franklin asked. Isla considered this. "Because the only person I would have told was Wren, and Wren wasn't there anymore." The silence that followed that sentence was the kind that doesn't need interpretation. The video was played for the court. 3 minutes, 47 seconds. Sylvie's voice was clear. Her words were unambiguous. The sound of a pen practicing a signature, repeated, deliberate, careful, was audible in the gaps between sentences. Sylvie Caldwell, seated in the gallery where she had positioned herself as a concerned observer, did not look at the screen. She looked at her hands. The forensic financial report came next. Clifford's investigator walked the court through the account structure, the shell entity, the routing path, the final beneficial owner, documents, records, digital signatures on account maintenance requests tied to an email address used on devices registered to Sylvie Caldwell. Thomas Hale raised no objections. He had none left to raise. Judge Norwood recessed for deliberation. The jury returned in 41 minutes. "Not guilty." On all counts. The sound in the courtroom was enormous, and Wren heard none of it. She sat at the defense table and felt Franklin's hand on her shoulder and heard Candace crying somewhere behind her, and she looked at the table and breathed. Just breathed. In and out. The specific relief of someone who has been holding their breath for 8 weeks. Then she looked up. Across the room, past the moving bodies and the journalists rushing for doors, and the court officers moving towards Sylvie Caldwell with purpose. Isla was standing at the edge of the witness area. Looking at her. Wren stood up. Isla crossed the room. Fast. And then she was there, arms around Wren's waist, face pressed against her, holding on with the grip of a child who has been carefully, deliberately composed for far too long and has finally been given permission to let go. Wren held her. She did not say anything. Some moments don't need language. Clifford Hargrove stood at the back of the courtroom. He had not sat during the testimony. He had stood motionless, arms at his sides through all of it. He watched his daughter hold onto Wren Baptiste. He watched the woman he had arrested, humiliated, and handed over to a legal system, without once asking her directly, without once sitting across from her and looking her in the eye, and saying, "Tell me the truth," hold his child like she was something worth keeping. He had been raised to believe that certainty was a virtue. He understood now that it had been a catastrophic failure. He approached slowly. Isla saw him first. She pulled back from Wren but stayed close, one hand still holding Wren's. Clifford stopped 3 feet away. He looked at Wren. For a long time, he didn't speak. He was not a man who found words easily in moments that mattered most. He had spent years substituting action for apology and efficiency for feeling. But this time, he didn't reach for any of that. "I didn't ask you," he said. His voice was different, not the controlled, modulated voice of a man in command, just a man's voice. "I had everything I needed to ask you directly, and I didn't. I chose the evidence over you, and I was wrong." Wren looked at him. "Yes," she said, "you were." He nodded. "I know. I had a family in your house, Mr. Hargrove. Isla was the closest thing to." She stopped, restarted. "I would never have done anything to hurt her, ever. I know that now. You should have known it then." Again he nodded. There was no redemption arc in that exchange, no dramatic reconciliation, no moment where the right words made everything clean again. Just a man standing in the courtroom of his own making, understanding what his certainty had cost, and a woman who had survived it choosing not to offer him an easy way out. That was honest. And honesty, after everything, was the only currency left. Sylvie Caldwell was arrested in the courtroom. She was charged with fraud, identity theft, financial crimes, and evidence fabrication. She did not cry. She did not speak. She was escorted out with the specific stillness of someone who has calculated and miscalculated and has nothing left to perform. Months later, she would be convicted on all counts. She would serve 6 years. Wren did not return to the Hargrove estate. She had a settlement. Clifford's lawyers reached out within a week. The figure was significant. Wren instructed her own lawyer with 2 requirements: a portion to be put directly into Isla's trust fund to replace what had been compromised during the investigation, and a portion to establish a fund for household workers in similar situations, people accused without investigation, dismissed without dignity. Clifford agreed to both without negotiation. Isla drew one more picture. She left it with Wren on the day. Wren came to collect the few personal things she'd left at the estate. 2 figures again, same as always, but this time they were standing in a courtroom, and underneath, in the careful handwriting of a child who was still learning how words work: "I told them the truth, because you taught me to." Wren folded the picture carefully, put it in her bag, and walked out into the light. "Thank you." Truly, thank you for staying until the very end of Ren's story. That says something about you, about the kind of person you are, someone who needs to know the truth, someone who stays when things get hard and dark and uncertain, someone who waits the way Isla waited for justice to find its way. Ren didn't fight loudly. She didn't break down. She stood still in the storm and trusted that the truth, even when buried, has a way of breathing. If this story stirred something inside you, a memory, a feeling, a quiet question about someone you once trusted or someone who once trusted you, then it did exactly what it was meant to do. If you're not yet part of this family, subscribe to Nanny Grace channel. Every story here was made for a heart that knows what it means to be overlooked, doubted, and ultimately seen. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to believe that truth still matters. And leave a comment below, because your voice is part of this story too. Until next time, trust slowly, choose wisely, and never stop believing in what is right. Sometimes the hardest truth isn't what was said, but what was never asked. Clifford had all the evidence in the world. But not once, did he sit across from Ren and ask her, "Did you do this?" He chose certainty over conversation, documentation over dignity. And an innocent woman paid for his silence with 8 weeks of her life. Some wounds don't disappear just because someone says sorry. Think about that for a moment. Here is your question for today. If you were Ren, would you have forgiven Clifford? Or would you have taken the settlement, walked away, and decided that some doors, no matter how many times someone knocks, were better left permanently closed? And here is the second question, the harder one. If you were Clifford, could you live with what your pride cost someone who only ever gave your family her best? There are no easy answers here, only honest ones. I am reading every comment. If you think what happened to Ren was shocking, wait until you see what happened when the billionaire slapped the nanny in front of his own daughter. What she did next changed everything. Watch that story next. Nanny Grace channel, where the truth always finds its way home.